Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my 2024-2025 Conference Championship Weekend predictions. Well, for the Fanatic this week, it was a average to above average week in terms of my against the spread and spread picks. Through the 4 games, I ended up going against the spread 2-1-1. Due to the Eagles winning by 6 points and the Rams being able to cover that spread, so that's a push. And straight up, I went 500. So that for the year now against so for the postseason through 10 games, I am now 4-5-1 against the spread, and straight up now I am 6-4. So that equals 45% against the spread, and straight up now that equals 60% straight up. So 1 game under 500 for the postseason. So fortunately with 3 games left, I will be able to maintain a winning record, but obviously my against the spread with the postseason's been a little bit rougher than I wanted to. But those are the breaks. And now overall for the year, though, through 282 games, I'm now 146, 129, and 7 against the spread, which equals 53%. And straight up now, I am 282, which equals 70.9 or 71% straight up. So obviously, as we're winding down these videos, it's fantastic to be at this spot. Unfortunately for me, that lion logo over there is no longer applicable. It's funny though, I had the Ravens and Eagles pretty much sandwiched in with the Chiefs, and even though I had the Bills over on this side over here, do want to apologize to Bills Mafia. Job well done to you all for the fantastic game that you played against the Ravens. It was a gritty game. It was odd. And, I think the biggest difference, and I think the biggest takeaway that everybody can take from watching these playoff games over the weekend is that the turnover battle matters. Every team that did not turn the ball over, 0, a donut, won their respective games. The only team that you could genuinely feel bad for are the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans did not commit a turnover. They outgained the Kansas City Chiefs by over 100 yards, and they still lost the game. And I will say this: I'm someone that I watched the game, and the Will Anderson penalty was atrocious, and Mahomes shouldn't have flopped out of bounds. Even though again, he didn't get a flag for that, but he committed an NBA style flop, and the one on Henry Toil, and I know I botched that name horribly, so please give me some grace there for that name pronunciation. And that one was a bit more debatable. I thought honestly he did contact it in the head, but the refs and the penalties did not influence that much of the game for the Chiefs. Do people realize that C.J. Stroud got sacked 8 times? Do people realize that D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick objectively made a horrendous call on that 4th down and 10 call? They should have punted the ball. You have 9 minutes left. Your defense was sensational. The only wide receiver that had any big play for the Chiefs was Xavier Worthy. You had DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Hollywood Brown, and Juju Smith-Schuster. 3 names that have some merit in the league, or some merit today, and obviously they have different levels of credibility among fans of the Cardinals, the Steelers, not the Patriots for Juju, but among the NFL. All of them had donuts in the game. Like, the Texans' defense was sensational in that regard. They held the Chiefs to 50 total rushing yards. But you gave up 8 sacks. You gave up a huge kick return, and then you had that one player push the special teams coach, Frank Smith, that gave him an extra 15 yards because he took off his helmet. So there were other ways where the Texans committed blunders that gave the Chiefs the opportunity to win the game regardless of the penalty situation. Also, the Texans just do not win this game. They're now 0-6 all time in the divisional round. And I think the Chiefs, look, they know how to close these games. And the one thing that they should have done is, hey, we had all the fun with all the receivers. And yeah, X was the only one. But did you forget about the greatest tight end in postseason history, Travis Kelce, who got 117, Patrick Mahomes 177 yards? I would have said, hey, let's have Juju. Let's have Marquise Brown. Let's even have D-Hop beat us instead of the most reliable weapon the Chiefs have. Okay, so look, the Texans, look, they had a great year. There should be optimism that they are going to be fine as a franchise. They are the standard of the AFC South, and they should be able to control the AFC South for a very long time with where those different franchises are. But I would tell you this. That feeling I had at the beginning of last year, where I thought they were the easiest team, or they could be the team that beat the Chiefs. You've been scarred now too much. You played them twice over a month, and both times you were outclassed and outcoached and outdone. So welcome to the Ravens, fam, Houston. Welcome to the Bills, fam. Welcome to the scarred squads of the NFL and the AFC that have played Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and just do not have the confidence in big spots to make the right plays or make winning plays when it has to. So, unfortunately, CJ Stroud, as long as Patrick Mahomes is there and as long as his roster is there, I don't think you're going to win a championship anytime soon. So, and kudos to the Chiefs. 7 straight conference championship games. Joins the New England Patriots as the only franchise to do that in this span. And they are, very much on track and consistently possibly on their way to getting a 3rd championship in a row, which, again, would be an NFL history mark. But, that way. Commanders-Lions, what a, crazy game. Jaden Daniels, what a superstar. I mean, this guy is, to me, right now for the Commanders fan base. Okay? He has already placed himself 3rd all time in the Commanders coaching lore. The Commanders quarterback lore. The only 2 people you could make a claim for could be Slingin' Sammy Ball, for all the older people, and Joe Theismann. But this kid, in his first year, is the 7th quarterback to make a conference championship game. He is obviously the most driving force behind that. He has been incredibly clutch, and he probably is playing the best pure statistically, measurement-wise, clutch-wise, out of all the quarterbacks that have played in the league. And I would argue today, going into next year, he's arguably the 6th best quarterback in the league. Behind the obvious 5 of Patrick, Lamar, Josh, Joe Burrow, and arguably Jalen Hurts, depending on what happens. Even though, people would obviously on a talent basis say Jaden Daniels is much more talented than Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts' success, we got to give it up to him a bit. But again, like Jaden Daniels, what an absolute superstar, and what a sensational year he had. The Commanders clutch on 4th down, 26 of 32, 81% on 4th down. They were able to basically execute every 4th down. And if Cliff Kingsbury, if that one player holds on to his block, they probably could go, 4 for 4 on 4th down in the clutch moments to win these games. Though Zane Gonzalez, I do have some concerns. If it does come down to a kick, he has shown that he sometimes can be clutch, but other times he gets lucky with doinks and makes some misses that he should not have. But for Detroit, it's a very disappointing day. Shout out to Halfman's Picks. Sorry, buddy. I rooted for your team. I thought you'd make it. I thought this was going to be the case, but I feel like for the Lions, they feel like the 2019 Ravens. They had all this talent, all this expectation, and it came down to Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, to certain extents, not properly being able. And you could argue that they were distracted, and obviously we all know now, Ben Johnson is the new head coach for the Chicago Bears. Job well done for them. Best offensive hire they've had since, I guess the 3rd offensive hire they've had over the last 10 years. And I believe that Ben will be a better coach than Mark Trestman and Matt Nagy. Though the one thing I would tell Bears fans, you might have got... I don't know if Ben is going to be the inspiring coach. Okay? People might think, oh, we got the next Sean McVay. Or, you think of 2 spectrums. If you really like him, it's like, oh, we got the next Sean McVay or Matt LaFleur. Or you could think, if you're a Bears hater, oh my God, they hired Adam Gase, former Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, ironically. But here's the problem, and this is maybe a point that I think Bears fans need to think about. Did you hire Mike McDaniel? Who's a good offensive mind? who is very creative, but is too much of a nerd. Mike McDaniel is just too much of a nerd. He is too soft, and he has no grit that Dan Campbell has to that franchise. And again, bringing in Dennis Allen for the Bears, for Ben, fantastic hire. Dennis was a god-awful head coach, got Derek Carr, fired him twice, but, he is an all-time pathetic head coach. That man should never be a head coach in any form of football, UFL, XFL, NFL, Canadian, he should never be a head coach. But as a defensive coordinator, he is a brilliant defensive coordinator. And again, it's a great hire for Ben Johnson's staff to have. However, I would say that is the one question I have. I think Ben seems a bit too much of a nerd instead of the culture builder. And I think in Chicago, they need to have more of something that if Ben can't create a culture and he's just all the brains, if something goes wrong or injuries happen, I don't know if he can get out of his own way or he won't try to get too cute, especially with that Jameson Williams pass. That was probably the dumbest call that he made the entire game. Though, for the Lions, I think their bigger question is Jared Goff, obviously having his worst game, or his second worst game of the year. You could argue the worst game because they lost, but, Jared Goff against the Texans, he threw 5 picks and 2 TDs there. But they somehow won that game. They couldn't win this one. And I think the Lions, they're going to be a great team next year. I think they should win the NFC North. But if you're telling me right now, do I have confidence the Lions can get to the NFC Championship game next year? I do not. I would tell you the Philadelphia Eagles will be in a better spot. I would tell you right now the Lions I'd have 4 today. 4. So again, I had them at 2-1 this year. They have to move back a little bit next year. Because I think the Philadelphia Eagles, the Washington Commanders, and the Los Angeles Rams, unless Matthew Stafford decides to hang it up. If Matthew Stafford decides to come back, those 3 organizations currently have a better and more confident infrastructure than I have with the Detroit Lions, especially if Aaron Glenn, a lot of people are expecting him to get hired by the New York Jets. And for him in that regard, best of luck to him. And I'm happy he gets the opportunity. But I think the problem is the Jets, Woody Johnson has hired one offensive coach in his entire tenure. And this constant cycle of Robert Saleh, Todd Bowles, Herm Edwards, Aaron Glenn, this constant defensive coach mindset has to be it hasn't worked for all these guys. Again, Todd obviously has done a good job with Tampa, but he's found a competent quarterback in Baker. Todd being aside in Tampa, but this just hasn't worked. And I could just see with Aaron Glenn, who put up a pitiful, pathetic defensive performance. I understand that he had a mash unit, or he had basically the remnants of a defense going out there, but just 2 weeks before you could probably play a more competent offense, maybe besides quarterback, and maybe that was the difference when you held them to 9 points. You gave up 45 points to the Commanders, who essentially, out of one drive, that knocked themselves out of their own way. So, again, I think the Lions, they're going to be a good team. They're going to be in a confident spot. I just feel like, again, are the Lions going to get to the conference title game, or can they? I don't necessarily know with the change they're going to have to make and where Jared Goff's standing or confidence is moving forward in those big spots. So there's that. And then Eagles-Rams, look, Stafford played a great game. He was probably, out of all the quarterbacks, he probably played the best in a losing effort out of the 4 that played, because Stafford did have 2 touchdowns. And honestly, I thought that was a crazy way to end the game. Though I do have to say this, for Sean McVay, I hope some people, it's the one thing that the Rams didn't have to do. And look, the Rams defensive line played very, very well. They got 4 or 5 sacks on Jalen Hurts. True, Jalen Hurts could not move. But at the end of the day, when you look at this situation, they couldn't stop the run. Saquon Barkley had over 250 yards the first time, and what does Sean McVay do? And you can say, yeah, I know, he hit 3 home runs, or he hit, They had 285 yards rushing, and Saquon had 130 yards on 2 runs. But you can't let that happen. There's been 12 60-plus yard touchdown runs. 4 of them have been by Sean McVay and the Rams defense against the Eagles. And I think that's the most disappointing thing in Sean McVay, that I have the same problem with Matt Burke. The one weapon that you had to try to stop was the weapon that killed you and was the biggest reason why you lost. If A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, I would have rather had that. I would have said, okay, Jalen has to have just a phenomenal day, or A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith are clowning our corners. Not Saquon Barkley, who's 160 yards away from having the all-time rushing total record for a complete season. You can't let that happen. And, look, for the Eagles, defense played well. Quinyon Mitchell's injury is obviously very big. And Jalen's knee is going to be paramount. But I do think that for the Eagles and everybody that looks at Jalen, look, the Eagles win games when Jalen Hurts does not have to throw that many yards. And to me, I'm someone that cares more about result than style or stat. Result more than, hey, the quarterback got carried or whatever. Because do people realize this? Jalen Hurts has now gone the 4th longest streak in postseason history without throwing an interception. Since over the past 3 postseasons, he's thrown over 190 plus passes. The record's Drew Brees from 2006-2011. That shouldn't matter. The Jalen Hurts, he may not be making big plays. You may be looking at this offense going my goodness, you have the best 2 wide receivers, a competent tight end, other people to get weapons, and it's he just hands it to Saquon and Saquon does all the work. But it's the point of saying Jalen will not cost you the game. The Rams turnovers, Matt Stafford cost them the game when he fumbled the football about 8 minutes to go. And even again, you can blame the center, Jalen Carter, who's probably the 2nd best defensive tackle in football right now, behind Stone Cold Chris Jones. But that's the thing you have to give Jalen credit for. And that's what I'm saying is Jalen Hurts, if he gets 2 more wins, well, first of all, if he gets this one, he'll become the first quarterback in over 30 years to make it back to a Super Bowl after he lost the first time. Which is pretty historic because not every quarterback that makes the Super Bowl debut and loses the game never gets back there. Jalen can do that. That's phenomenal. But Jalen's postseason success, along with his regular season success, will have to be put in together to say, hey, if Jalen wins the Super Bowl, he's a top 5 quarterback in this league. He could easily, by the end of this run, if he gets it, I can make a case he's the 2nd best quarterback in the league. Only behind Patrick Mahomes. If he wins the title and beats Patrick or beats Josh, he's the 2nd best QB in the league. Because there's no other quarterback that has that on their resume, and he would justify a $52 million contract the Eagles gave him. He would justify, he would have nothing else to prove for that contract to be paid off with that championship. And, but I think for the Eagles, though, it's going to be about that. And then, of course, our game, the turnovers were key. Lost the turnover battle 0-3. We've never won a game where we've had a turnover differential of -3. And, for the Ravens and the Bills, look, the Bills played an efficient game, and they've gotten to their first title game, or their 2nd title game within the last 5 years. Congrats to them. I just think the problem for the Ravens fans is this. This is the worst feeling about this game. I thought the Bills were going to have this feeling, but we had it. We took a step back. And I think the issue I have is that I don't know if, what can we do to make it feel better? Derek, we didn't run enough. He only had 16 carries for 80 yards. Josh, our defense, our run defense was the best in the league, gave over 170 yards to James Cook, Ray Davis, and great Cumberland native, great Marylander native, Ty Johnson. And that was embarrassing. Mark Andrews, 2 biggest drops of his career so far, came in at the worst possible time. Again, he was the one that got his 4th downs on those flockerly shoves, from the Ravens. But it just comes down to, for me, the two main people, Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh. Let's talk about John Harbaugh, too, by the way. Raven fans need to think about this. John Harbaugh has underachieved the last 9 years. Okay, or since 2019. He has underachieved with Lamar Jackson, but he has underachieved as the Ravens head coach. If you are looking at a guy that is going to have the 3-time MVP, there is an argument to say you've only been to one conference championship game. You lost to Josh Allen. You lost to Ryan Tannehill. You've lost these key moments in key spots over and over and over again. And it's just like, when can it get better? When can we change? And firing John Harbaugh should be that move, or thinking about it. Because we're not going anywhere. We're like a better version of the Steelers, because the only difference is that we've won playoff games within the last 8 years, unlike the Steelers who haven't. And again, you can say, like, oh, Harbaugh's been better than Tomlin. Yes, he has. But people would give, I think the pass to Tomlin is, Mike Tomlin's Big Ben's left over the past, 5 years, or I'm sorry, since over the past 3 years at least, is they haven't been able to find a quarterback. We have the possible 3-time MVP, and we can't even get him to the dance. We can't even let him lose to the best quarterback, which is a massive problem. Because again, like I said, Lamar Jackson's top 5 status is in jeopardy depending on what happens. And I would tell you this. Let's say the Commanders win. And you might think I'm bashing on Lamar or whatever. But I will openly say this. I have no shame in saying this. Ask yourself this. If you could have Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels, okay, in a vacuum. I understand Cliff's there, Todd's there, Cliff's better than Todd's, whatever. If Jaden Daniels wins this game, I'd rather have Jaden Daniels for the next 5 years, regardless of situation. Even though I know the Commanders have $100 million in space, than Lamar Jackson. Because Jaden Daniels has at least shown me, in at least his first postseason so far, that he has come up clutch, big-time moment after big-time moment after big-time moment in postseason games. Lamar has had, arguably in those spots, 2 times he's come up clutch. The other wins, well, I guess he's only come up 1 time. The other 2 games he played well. Obviously the Pittsburgh game was probably his best game start to finish. The Texans game where he got his second win, that's great too. But that's the problem I have, is that Lamar Jackson's an arguable, but not a top 5 quarterback, in my opinion. Because he's not Patrick, he's not Josh. He might not be Jalen, who will have much more team success, Jaden Daniels, and Joe Burrow. If, depending on what happens, okay, and I would argue again, Lamar and Jaden, is based off team success, and I know Lamar's probably the better talent out of those people, but that's the question you have to have. Joe's just a harder one because of the lack of playoff appearances over the last 2 years compared to Lamar getting there, but that's where it's, I'd probably say you could probably take Lamar over Burrow because of that recency of Joe being maybe probably a better quarterback than Lamar, but not being able to get to the postseason, if it was his fault or not. So, yeah, so those are my quick thoughts on the divisional weekend. Let me get into my predictions. Should be a very short little run here. So, on Sunday evening, January 26, 2025, on Conference Championship Game weekend, when the 6th-seeded Washington Commanders travel to Philadelphia to have the third and decisive game in the trilogy of this NFC East rivalry. The Philadelphia Eagles are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me Philadelphia here -6, and Philadelphia straight up. And in the AFC Championship game, when the number 2 seeded Buffalo Bills travel to Kansas City, take on the number 1 seeded Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are 2-point favorites in that game. Give me Kansas City here -2, and Kansas City straight up. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The Philadelphia Eagles over the Washington Commanders. This comes down to me, to where regardless of what Jalen Hurts' knee injury is, and he will play, I think the Eagles can just literally run again, the air out of the football. Saquon Barkley has been dominant in both of these games. They have outrushed the Commanders by 233 total yards in both division games. I think the Eagles with Jalen, he can make some big plays. AJ Brown has had a great history going up against the Commanders for the most part. They forced 5 turnovers the last time, and I know the Commanders are able to come back from a 5 turnover deficit and beat the Philadelphia Eagles, even though Jalen was hurt. When you look at the Commanders and the Eagles, it's where the best thing that will happen is the Commanders have to genuinely sell out to stop Saquon, and if they force Jalen on a bum knee to basically play pocket passer against Jaden Daniels, I don't think they will have a good chance to win, because Jaden and Jalen as pocket passers, it's night and day difference to what you see from the game, what you see on film. Like, the Commanders will have a shot. And also, again, I think if the Eagles defense can, take some hits, gets, scored on by the Commanders, I think it will add pressure on the Eagles. But I think the Eagles will commit to the run, and they will run the air out of this football. I think the Eagles, a lot of those guys were there from the 22 team. They have a lot of the experience and confidence to feel like they can go back in there and get back there for the third time, or for a lot of them the third time, for Jalen and the second. It's just hard for me to say, okay, the last time they played, Terry McLaurin, who's been the best skill position player for the Commanders this year, I believe was held to like 1 catch and 5 yards at Guantanamo Bay. And look, De'Ami Brown and Zach Ertz going back to his original place where he was drafted and played well. I think they could be the X factors, but De'Ami Brown's going to have to be the X factor for the Commanders, because they're going to need to find a way to get other offensive production out of their wideouts besides Terry, and that leans on De'Ami Brown. And I just feel like when you look at the Commanders and the Eagles, they know they have the better quarterback. I think the Eagles, the way the Commanders won both their games were because of turnovers in key spots and big clutch decisions. And I just think if both teams play a clean game, the Eagles are just more talented offensively. They're more talented defensively. And I think they have a good enough defensive line that they can keep Jaden Daniels in the pocket, or they can at least have the athletes to go manage his scrambles. And again, he had 2 picks against the Eagles last time in D.C. And I just think, again, when you just have this kind of moment of confidence, yeah, Dan Quinn's been there before. This is his first NFC title game since 2016. But I think, in this spot, I think the rookie, he will play well. And I think, he will put up a fantastic showing like he's done the last couple times. But in this spot, give me the hardened run team, the better offensive line. Sam Cosmi, big injury for the Commanders. Tore his ACL. He signed a 4-year, $72 million extension earlier before the season started. He has started the last 34 games over the last 2 years. So that is going to be a significant blow to their offensive line. That's key. I think the Jake Elliott, Zane Gonzalez thing, Jake Elliott's obviously a better kicker than Zane, but there is concerns about Jake Elliott's yips, especially after he missed 2 extra points last Sunday against the Rams. And it just, when you look at the Eagles and you look at the Commanders, both these teams are playing efficient football. And if you're just going to look at it from the efficient standpoint, I'll take the Eagles with their style of offense going against the Commanders' defense with their protection more than I would the Commanders going against the Eagles' defense, knowing what they will face with a weakened offensive line and a quality secondary that can hold up for Jaden Daniels to not make plays. Jaden Daniels' legs are going to have to be key in order to extend first downs and extend passing plays to get more wide open plays open. So, should be a fantastic game, but in this regard, I think the Eagles are close. And to me, they're home, more consistent, and I would just trust the Eagles' running game and defense to hold up more than I would the Commanders' defensive line and the Commanders' offensive line, especially for Sam Cosmi going down. Sounds like Philadelphia -6 and Philadelphia straight up. And lastly, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Buffalo Bills. This one is essentially a trust factor. Look, the Buffalo Bills have been better This has been probably the best Bills team that we've seen during this 7-year run, or you could argue this 5-year run of 2020. This 5-year run starting from 2020, the last time we got blown out in the conference title game. And I think, the Bills, they're efficient. They've overachieved by a country mile. They've even progressed more than what people thought of what they did the last 3 years. When they got knocked out of the divisional round the last 3 years, they're in the conference championship game again. And this Kansas City team, blew them out the first time, they won again. But the thing that I keep coming back to is it's Andy and Patrick against Sean and Josh. Josh has been great. Josh has earned, the right to be the second best quarterback in the league. He was a second team All-Pro, and I would give him the MVP off of the performance. But there's only one Patrick Mahomes. There's only one Andy Reid. And I know, and here's the thing. I wanted this matchup because I knew the Ravens were never going to go into Kansas City. A place that Lamar has never won, but a place that Lamar Jackson has one career win over over Patrick Mahomes. That was a 1.45-44 win that we had to win off a fourth down. So I had no faith that the Ravens could go into Kansas City again. And win that game. I have some belief that the Buffalo Bills, in the regular season, they've gone into Kansas City the last 2 years in the regular season and beaten the Kansas City Chiefs in sometimes decisive but quick fashion. One when they won 38-20, the other one they won 23-20 the last time, but everybody was angry the last time in Kansas City because of that horrific offside penalty, which was the right call, but I've seen the Bills do it. The Bills beat the Chiefs this year in Buffalo. It came down to a 4th and 2 of Josh Allen 26-yard scramble to put the game away. And again, so that's where I have the confidence that Buffalo could do this. Buffalo was always going to be the better matchup because they have the experience and they have the belief that they can go into Kansas City and win a football game. The problem is that they haven't won it when they mattered. And I think that's going to be the key thing to me is saying, okay, can Josh Allen, with that bad of a defense, if both teams play clean football, because last time, the big reason why the Chiefs lost in Buffalo was that Mahomes had 2 turnovers. Whoever plays the more efficient game, and if you tell me both play an efficient game, the Chiefs will win this game. Because the Chiefs just understand in this spot how their players can execute. I think the Bills' defense, the Ravens were able to run for them incredibly well. They were able to pass very well. Josh Allen only had 120 yards. And I just think the Chiefs' defense can hold up enough with their run defense, to how stout it is with their secondary. The Chiefs, with Pat, they can get pressure on Allen. They will get sacks. They will get the pressures. And they will get the Bills to make mistakes and face the pressure, unlike Mahomes, who has been in that spot, all the way through. Again, it should be a phenomenal game. Our game was great, though. It was muddied. This is, literally the best team that can take on the King. And if you come at the King, you best not miss Buffalo. But until I see it, especially with being at home, especially with the rosters they have, I got to roll with Kansas City in this one. Sorry, Bills Mafia. I'm not being an angry Ravens fan. I am rooting for you personally. I want this run to end. But it's just hard if you're picking the game to say, man, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Arrowhead, 7 consecutive conference title game. They've done this before the last 3 times. They've been all close in regard in the postseason. And it just seems like Kansas City will make a play and make a big decision that I don't think Josh will. Because that's the point. It's saying, if you're talking about efficiency versus explosion, both these teams have basically showed you this year, they're not that way this year. So it's just going to come down to late game execution. And I've seen the Chiefs, and it's going to come down to tight games as well. The Buffalo Bills, under Sean McDermott, have been awful in one-score games. In Kansas City's case, they've won 16 straight one-score games, which is an NFL record, but they're used to it. And I think that is a massive advantage in this game. Is that for the Bills, they're going to think, oh no, we are going to have to be in a dogfight. And Kansas City's like, okay, we've been here before. We know what to do. All we have to do is stick to our plan And the key thing is they're going to have to keep contained on Josh Allen. And maybe the Bills too, because Patrick Mahomes has those scrambles. But it just, at the end of the day, the Chiefs know how to do this. They've won all this all the time. And I think there is a lot more pressure on the Bills than the Chiefs. Because again, the last team that had a possible three-peat was the 1988 to 1990 San Francisco 49ers. And all the Niner fans know, if Wilbur Marshall does not flatten Joe Montana and Steve Young comes in, maybe Jeff Hofstetler as the backup doesn't win. And to me, it's where when you look at what the Chiefs understand what the assignment is, they understand what they have to do. And there's no like if the Chiefs lose, okay, they were like the 88 to 99ers. Played a great game against a competent organization, ironically who played Buffalo in that title game in 1990, the New York Giants. And they'll be fine. The three-peat's over, and it's unfortunate, but they're going to still be the class of the league. Where the Bills, it's saying, if it's not you, if it's not Buffalo, and I will objectively say this might be the hottest thing I'm going to say, I don't believe there is any team in the NFL that can play the Chiefs outside of the Washington Commanders. Because I know the Eagles, even though I know, Eagle fans will be all hyped. It's like, yeah, we get our rematch, we got our secondary, even though I still think the Chiefs will win the game because, again, are you going to take Patrick and Andy or Nick and Jalen in a big game? I'll leave that to everybody's assumption, but probably where I'm going to lean. But it's just like, the scarring will be permanent, and that's the worst thing. Is that there's no team in the league that I feel has enough talent if the Bills don't win this opportunity or, construction. That I feel like no team in the AFC is not going to go into this game saying, my God, we have to play Andy and Patrick again, and because it keeps happening, we will keep losing to Andy and Patrick because we can't beat these guys because we get nervous. And I get it because it's scarring from year after year after year after year after year after year after year, and then going next year after year. So I would make sure I counted. Of just this constant disappointment or this constant failure of not beating that team. So, and I think in the league, the only team that you could have faith for would be the Washington Commanders and maybe the Philadelphia Eagles, but I can get some of the Eagles fans for bottom. But in the AFC at least, Buffalo knows they have to end this. Buffalo knows that. Because if they can't, then, and you can say, well, Joe Burrow's the only one. But again, that's going to make the case that, you can make the case that if Kansas City wins, the second best quarterback in the NFL is Joe Burrow. Because if he wins Super Bowl, he's the only one that has a playoff win against Patrick Mahomes. And again, I just came, and you could look at Joe and say that shouldn't hold as much weight. But if his non-playoff appearances are negative 50 points, that playoff win is worth 1,000,000 points in gold. Because that would definitively tell you, and anybody that says that, that's a hard trump card to say, especially if he's beating everybody else in the conference, especially the other two guys in Lamar and Josh consistently in these big moments. But yeah, I'm going to take the Chiefs. Bills' defense has been rough. I think they'll be able to run the ball more effectively. Hollywood, and I think that's going to be the key factor for the game as well. The Bills and Chiefs wide receivers who did nothing in their respective divisional games are going to have to be key because I think those guys are going to have to make the big plays. But I think the Chiefs stop their run game a bit more, and I think the Chiefs, with their passing game, of how they're able to play, especially with the injury to Taylor Rapp in the secondary, I think the Chiefs grind out another impressive, gritty win to get to their third consecutive Super Bowl, to give them the opportunity to one final step from completing history. So, that's like Kansas City or -2 and Kansas City straight up. But those are my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page to go see Fire and Brim Sports, Half Moon's Picks, Bridgewater's Finest, Andrew Warren, all those guys and gals that make predictions like I do every week. I should make my Super Bowl prediction video sometime next week. I don't know exactly when I'll have time, but I will be making my Super Bowl prediction video and my wrap-up video for the year, where I'll also give my Super Bowl 60. Hard to believe we're at the 60th edition of the Super Bowl here next year, but yeah, that's my update. That's my little prognosis for the next couple weeks. My Super Bowl prediction should come out next week sometime, and I'm excited for it, but unfortunately, I still have a chance for half, but fortunately to the Lions, I could be half adjacent. If you see the Lions right there, I should just move the Eagles and Lions, and I would have been perfectly fine. But but that is it. So good luck to all players, coaches, teams, daily fantasy players, and other prognosticators. The final 3 games, it's a very sad time, very exciting time, but the games mean the most, but there's a few of them left, and it's unfortunate, but that's the joy of the game. But until next week, this is Matthew Mack signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.